Today, I decided to come back over by the Corte Madera Creek, but this time I'm a little bit further to the west and headed towards Kentfield up in this area. It's just such a beautiful area to kind of walk around. And it's actually pretty warm today, guys. It feels like probably 78 degrees, something like that, but still nothing compared to Miami, of course. I've been tracking these emails that I've been getting from this mortgage company called Fairway Mortgage in South Florida. And every week they send out a new email as a newsletter with different reasons and different financing programs and things that they have available to get people to buy. And literally right now, they want you to buy going into this recession, guys. And some of you might say, oh, well, we're not in a recession yet, blah, 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 blah. Well, we will be in one, and it's almost a guarantee that we will be in one, at least when it comes to the official numbers, when the yield curve uninverts. But we'll get to that a little bit later in the video. But anyhow, right now, they're telling people they have a new program, 97% of the loan that they'll give you, up to $1 million. And this is for professionals that are in the medical, doctor, attorney, CPA, nurse practitioner field. And the minimum credit score for this is 680, which is a lot better than the 620 for some of these other programs. And they say that we can even exclude student loan payments if they are deferred for at least 12 months. So they're basically telling people to go ahead and not pay your student loan bills right now. They're giving people the 12-month grace period as these payments are starting to resume, where if you don't pay, they don't report you to the credit agency for not paying. And it says you have to live in one of these following counties in Florida, which you guys can read there. But then, if you scroll down on this email a little bit further, what does it say? The job sector is starting to cool. According to the ADP report, showed that there was 177,000 jobs created, which was weaker than the 200K expected. Companies like Adidas, Adobe, IBM, Salesforce are cutting their employees. This means reassigning workers with lower pay and a lower title so they can trim costs and potentially cut jobs. This generally is a sign of a recession on the horizon. History shows that recessions bring lower mortgage rates. Stay tuned. So they're literally sending out this email telling people you can defer your student loan payments, you can get into a house and buy right now with only 3% down. Don't worry about it, because in 12 months from now, you'll figure it out then, and you can start repaying your student loans then when you're actually going to get dinged for not paying them. And they're literally telling you that we're heading into a recession at the end of the email. So this is kind of crazy, guys, because on the one hand, at least they are telling people that we're heading into this recession, but they're still encouraging people to buy with these sweetheart deal programs that they keep coming out with for pretty much every single type of buyer under the sun that they can convince to buy right now. And that's my beef with all of this, right? Because you have to understand one thing about people in the mortgage business and real estate business in general, guys. Now, these people are not your friends. They are in the business to make money. Makes sense, just like the insurance companies. They need to turn a profit. But they don't care if you make the wrong decision right now, because all they need to do is make the next commission. So that's what you need to understand that they're in business for. They're not in the business of watching your ass and making sure that you don't get burned, okay? That's not their business. That's your business to be dealing with, and hopefully it's one of the reasons why you watch my channel. And I'm not even telling anybody that you shouldn't be buying right now. Sometimes you guys write me very interesting stories and scenarios with different properties that you've been looking at, how much it's gone down by, and this is my financial situation, this is my life situation, and a lot of times it makes sense for some people to buy, even right now. But all of those scenarios that I'm referring to right now are all from people that know what they're doing, essentially. They have been watching their markets. They've been watching my videos. They have been paying attention to the prices. And almost in all these cases, prices have been dropping in these metros where people are buying. And it's dropped enough now where they feel comfortable pulling the trigger, even though they know they might have to ride the wave down a little bit more as the economy continues to get worse. But they're okay with it, guys. And that's what I keep telling people. Like, you need to understand these things if you're going to get in the game right now. And just so you know, if you are going to buy right now heading into a recession, it's not just about the actual numbers of the property and if you can afford it and all of this, because like they said at the end of that email, people are losing jobs, guys. And that's what happens in a recession. And it's not uncommon for the unemployment rate to shoot up to 10% in a recession relatively quickly. And right now, only at like 3.8%. So we are not even anywhere near the recessionary numbers of the unemployment levels. But if we hit that, you can rest assured that many people are going to be struggling and will be in a position that they need to sell their property, even if they're not a recent buyer. And that is something I just keep warning people against. It doesn't mean don't buy, it just means understand the risk of what could potentially happen if you do buy right now. Because one advantage you have of not buying right now as a renter, that if that happens, you move out, you lose your security deposit, what are you losing? A couple $1,000s versus a massive down payment that you put for a property, plus all of the equity you've put into it as far as your mortgage payments up to that point. You have a lot more to lose as a potential homeowner than a renter. But it doesn't mean that people shouldn't become homeowners. In fact, I believe that everybody should get on the property ladder at some point in time, but only when the time makes sense for you. But here's how we also know for a fact that we are going into a recession, guys. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. Forget about the GDP figures for a moment, because we talked about that the other day on how much of a lie all of that is. But look at this. Right now, for a 3-month treasury, you can get a 5.45% rate. For a 2-year treasury, you can get a 4.89% rate. Okay, for a 10-year treasury, you can get a 4.19% rate. And this is the problem and the big warning signal that the recession is coming, because institutional bond investors believe the U.S. economy will slow down enough for the Federal Reserve to switch direction and begin reducing interest rates. Now, at the most recent Jackson Hole meeting, Powell said that they're not going to be doing this anytime soon. But the caveat to that is if everything doesn't start come crashing down soon, because if it does, then they will pivot. And this is why these investors are loading up on these 10-year bonds, pushing their prices up and their market yields down. The longer that this whole high interest rate environment goes on for, then the higher the yield is going to go up on these 10-year treasuries, because investors are looking to lock in the longest term high rate as possible. So basically, the investor activity right now is a big warning sign that we are headed for a recession. Every single time when we've had the inverted yield curve like we have right now, which is what we just discussed, that the short-term treasuries are giving a better return than the long-term treasuries, when that reverses and goes back to normal and the 10-year treasury is giving a bigger return than the 3-month, guys, that's when the yield curve is officially uninverted, and that's when we're going to see the recession really crash into the U.S. economy. And this is not my theory or some made up crazy thing. This is historic data that proves that this is what happens every single time. And this is why I just think it's smarter for a lot of people to be renting right now that haven't really done the research, or they live in an area where the rent prices are so much lower than buying something kind of like here where I'm walking through right now. There are certain scenarios where renting still makes a lot of sense. But like I said, I do think everybody should get on the property ladder at some point, with the caveat being that if you can save enough money renting and you have the financial discipline to take that savings and make other investments with the money, then I think it's okay to be a renter for life, as long as you are deploying that money that you're supposedly saving as a renter into other investments that's making enough of a return that pretty much pays for your rent, guys. So essentially then you're living rent free because your investments are paying for your rent, and you don't even need to have a ton of money to do that these days with where interest rates are at. Like, for example, you can get a CD now that pays a 6% rate. Say you have $300,000 to invest. That means you're getting $18,000 a year in interest payments, guys, just on that CD payment. That could be enough to pay your rent if you live in an affordable area. So that's what I'm talking about when it comes to people being able to deploy their money in other ways, and especially even with the stock market, right? I'm not saying that's a good time to invest in the stock market, but when you look at the historical returns, 7% a year, if you have enough money saved up and put it in there instead, and you're making a good enough return, you can really offset the cost of renting. And if things go bad and you need to move, you can just move somewhere else and find another place that's cheaper again and rinse and repeat. And this is exactly what apparently 26% of Americans are doing right now, that say that they actually prefer renting versus buying. And it's for a myriad of different reasons. But one of the most interesting reasons that I read about this is how the cultural emphasis of owning a home, and that's the only path to success, is actually changing among young people, especially those that want the freedom to be able to travel and work remotely in different areas. You know, owning a home is not as important to people like that as it once was, because they're not looking for the stability that owning a home offers to begin with. And that's kind of the biggest appeal to becoming a homeowner, is being able to stay in one place, having a safe place to raise your family, and knowing that you're not going to get kicked out next year by your landlord. And it used to be that you would have a more fixed monthly expense, which is no longer true. And I've covered that a bunch of times here on the channel, because even if you have a fixed mortgage rate, your other expenses, your property taxes, your insurance, your home maintenance are all going to go up. And with the way things are going these days, they can go up to a very unsustainable level very quickly. And then of course you have one of the other main reasons 26% of Americans are not interested in becoming homeowners is the price. To buy a house right now costs more than ever when it comes to the price combined with the interest rates. And there are many cases across the country, guys, almost everywhere right now. We're talking over 90% of metros in the United States, it is cheaper to rent than to buy. And I showed you guys some examples here on my walk since I've been in California, where you know, you could rent one of these condos around here that are on the waterfront here for like $3,500 a month, for example, to buy that place and pay the mortgage plus the HOA, taxes and insurance and all that. It'd be like $7,000, $8,000 a month, guys. So double what it would cost to rent the same exact place. So if you actually have the money that you could potentially buy that, right? And you choose not to, and you save that extra $3,500 a month and invest it, that can be a very smart financial decision and can propel you well into the future over somebody that decides to pour that $7,000 into that place. But it all comes down to preference and lifestyle, which leads me right to the next point, which is that people want to have investment diversification, okay? You know, when people buy homes, especially at these prices, a lot of times you can end up sinking all of your life savings into the house because it costs so much to get in with a down payment, it costs so much to close, it costs so much to keep up with the yearly maintenance and everything that needs to be done with the house. A lot of times people want to remodel different parts of the house and spend money on that. You can easily, by the time you do that and take a couple vacations and have regular life going on, have no money left over for any other type of investment. And that's not a place you want to be in either. And this is one of my favorite reasons why people aren't interested in becoming a homeowner right now, because there's no guarantees that becoming a homeowner leads to wealth. Now, for very many people it has been, and you can pretty much look at every single billionaire in the world, they own real estate. That is a fact, guys. I am not going to dispute that, and I still believe in real estate. I think that everybody should probably own real estate. But the reality is it's not for everyone, and people that look at it as too much of a risky investment saw what happened during the last housing crash. They probably think it's too risky to invest in it right now, and I don't blame them. And then, you know, of course you have people that just have commitment issues, people that are afraid to jump into a long-term deal and say, yeah, I'm definitely going to live here for at least 10 years to make sure I don't lose my shirt on it. That's a big life commitment, and it's very hard to do that unless you know, you have a baby on the way and you're starting a family, and you just kind of know that this is going to have to be the spot for a while, and you know, your income situation is stable. And probably people that are in more affordable markets are going to be doing this as well, like where I grew up in the Midwest, that's a very common way for people to proceed in life, because you can still get an affordable house there. You can still buy a house, a nice house, for 150 grand in a lot of places, or definitely under 200K in many areas. And that's a stable situation to find yourself in when you're looking to start a family. But not everybody wants to have that responsibility, because now all the maintenance is on you. You have to do everything yourself. You know, every weekend it's what needs to be done, what kind of chores I have to do around the house, versus just renting that takes care of all of that for you. But one thing you really need to watch out for if you are renting is rental fees, because this is something that's becoming a big issue with a lot of rentals, guys. So what's happening right now is different landlords, especially institutional ones, and you need to watch out for these institutional landlords, are charging fees for every single thing you can think of on top of the rent. So you have them charging for parking, pet fees, they're charging for trash pickup, pest control, even to be able to use a mailbox, which is criminal if you ask me, that they're charging all of this. A pet fee I can understand, because they do cause more wear and tear on the place, but to be able to use your mailbox or pick up the trash, all that stuff should be included in the rent. But they're finding ways to not include this in order to make extra money, because they've realized that raising the rents is no longer a viable way to increase their revenue, because now rents have basically leveled out and are even going down in some areas. So raising the rents right now is basically out of the question for pretty much every landlord, and they need to find other ways to continue growing their business. And by charging you extra fees is a great way to do it. Even have this landlord in Minnesota charging every single one of their tenants a lease administration fee every year in January of $100, which basically is nothing. They're just charging people the $100 to collect extra money, but they claim it's for being able to write up a new lease every year for you or whatever. In Phoenix, you had a building that started charging for valet trash pickup. How ridiculous does that sound, right? So they charge $30 on top of your monthly rent to come pick up the trash from your apartment, when you can just walk 30 or 50 feet away from your front door and throw it in the dumpster yourself. That's what this is coming to, and how desperate these landlords are to collect extra money right now. And if you don't think they're collecting that money, you would be wrong, because look at this. The 5 largest single-family home rental landlords increased their annual fee income per lease by about 40% between 2018 and 2021. So a span of just 3 years, they've increased their fee income by 40%. And Invitation Homes, they are one of the worst offenders with this, because they're charging fees for all sorts of things. Anything from having a video doorbell on your house to having extra air conditioning filters in the house, somebody to come over and change the air conditioning filters, stupid things like that, they're charging fees for. And the worst part is, people are paying it, okay? People are paying these fees and not flat out refusing to pay them, first of all. And we know it's working, because Invitation Homes' other income on their balance sheet, okay, grew at more than twice the rate of rent last year, according to the company's public filings. So this is proof that these guys are going to start nickel and diming you every single way possible. So then you're going to say, Michael, well, how can I avoid this? I'm renting, I cannot afford to buy right now, or I'm just one of those people that doesn't want to buy. What do I do? Well, luckily you're watching my video. Now, first of all, before you sign a lease with any of these landlords, make sure to ask about the fees up front, okay? Because what happens to a lot of people is this is not disclosed by the leasing office or the leasing agent, whoever's writing the lease for you, and people give their notice at their previous place, you know, they change their address and all this, and they go into the office and sign the lease and like, oh, whoa, I didn't know I was going to pay $30 for trash pickup. I didn't know I was going to get charged this $100 lease re-signing fee every year and all this, but they got you in between a rock and a hard place, because if you don't sign it, you just gave notice at your old place and changed your whole life around, and now you have to move forward with it. So that's one reason, in one way, they're getting people to pay. So ask about this stuff up front, number one. And another way to avoid this is to avoid institutional investors altogether, guys, which is not really that hard to do, because you know if you're going to be renting from Invitation Homes or Open Door or BlackRock or whoever, okay, Homes for Rent, USA, all these places, and just don't rent from them, because these are going to be the type of landlords that are going to be charging you these fees. I guarantee it. There might be a few little shady slumlords along the way, private individual mom and pops that might do this, but for the large vast majority of them, they don't do this. And I know because I've done hundreds and hundreds of rentals as a real estate agent in Miami over the years. And the problem is, all these companies, they all have their own customized lease that's different from most of the leases you've probably seen before, that's completely written in their favor. And unless you're willing to hire an attorney to read your lease, chances are you're going to get screwed over with something in there that you weren't aware of. But one of the best things you can actually do, besides not renting from the institutional investors and asking about these fees ahead of time, is to also have a real estate agent, guys. And yes, some real estate agents actually do rentals. And the reason why you want this is because, for example, in Florida, I don't know how many other states do this, but I'm assuming many of them do, we have a contract called a contract to lease. And this is essentially a contract that you enter into before you actually sign the lease. And the whole purpose of it is to agree on who pays for what and when before you actually get into the lease. And that's a huge advantage for you as the tenant, because you're going to know what the upfront fees and costs are going to be every single month before you sign the lease and commit to it, okay? So this is actually very beneficial to you as a tenant. So if you can get a preview of what all your monthly costs and fees are going to be ahead of signing the lease, that's a huge advantage for you, and you can back out of the deal before you actually get into a permanent lease and lose your deposit and all this stuff. So there are ways to avoid these fees as a renter, but you need to be diligent and follow what I just said. But one thing that's truly alarming right now is that people are spending more on rent and on housing in general than ever before. It's generally advised to never spend more than 30% of your gross monthly income on your rent, similar to your house payment. So it's all a housing payment, doesn't matter if it's applied to your rent or your mortgage. And Moody's Analytics, they've been keeping track of how much people have been spending on their rent payments for the past 25 years. And guess what? It's the highest now than it's ever been in the last 25 years. And I understand that sometimes this might not be an option for people, guys, because obviously this all greatly depends on your income. If you make, 200 grand a year, you can afford to spend $5,000 a month on your rent, because that's only, 30% of your income. No big deal, right? But somebody that only makes 50 grand a year, for example, that only translates to $1,250 a month. It only leaves you $3,000 left over in your monthly budget to cover any other expenses you might have. So there is some merit to the fact that if you have a higher income, you could probably go over this amount more than somebody who has a lower income. And that's why I wanted to bring this up, because when I was renting, guys, probably the first 3 years of my real estate career were off to a rough start. I started during the housing crash, okay? So it was really hard to make money and actually make enough to survive, but I did. But the downside was I had to spend about 50% of my income, sometimes more, on rent, because every month was different. I worked on commission, so every single month I would make less money, more money, and you have to kind of budget for the months that you're not making as much, for the months that you are, and this and that. So I know what it's like to have to spend 50% plus of your income on rent, which could be very necessary for people facing this situation right now. However, I personally think the best way out of that is to just make more money, guys. People will tell you live below your means and all of this and that, but sometimes it's just not possible. Like, yeah, could I have gotten a little bit cheaper place? Sure. But I wouldn't be saving enough money to have made the move worth it. And then I also would have been in a much lower cost of living area, which means my income would have went down, because I would be selling real estate in less than desirable areas and frankly living in dangerous areas. So what I decided to do instead, which I think everybody should do, is to just make more money. And I know that's not possible for everybody that works on a salary job, so you might have to get a side hustle or start a side business or pick up another job to actually make more money. But you have to do what it takes, because that's what I had to do also. And since I was in a commission-based business, that's how I was able to make more money. I didn't need to get a second job. I was like, okay, I got to sell more houses. I got to do more rentals. So I just need to work harder. And that's what I did, you know, and it worked. And it was very hard, but it made it so I didn't have to spend 50% of my income on rent, and it slowly made it so you can get ahead and you can put some money away and have some savings and eventually buy your own place, which is what I did. And everybody needs to be doing this, guys. Like, if you're spending 50% of your money on rent, you need to find ways to make more money, because I wouldn't be counting on the rent going down by 30% anytime soon. So the only other way out of this is to just make more money. And I know that might not be what a lot of people want to hear, but I think it's the most realistic approach to get out of spending half of your income on rent. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you don't want to wait for my next one to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.